where you talked about goals and systems.
Sure.
Okay, and in the goals and systems, the way you said it was better than the way I said it. But let me just give you a little background. When I started off as a young leader, I set a lot of goals. I took goal setting seminars and did goal setting practices. And then one day I began to understand that I would hit a goal, and then I kind of look and say, well, what's next? And I felt that there was a missing piece, and so I kind of shifted from being goal oriented to growth oriented. I still had goals in my life, but I said I want to grow in this area. I want to grow in the leadership lane. And so, but when I saw that you talked about the systems, which are the processes, it's the process. I love that because I felt when you spoke of that this is a big miss with a lot of people, that they are kind of outside directed with the goals and they don't have that process, that system that allows them to really long-term sustain and continue to go beyond your, because I say if you're growth oriented, you'll hit a goal and you'll say that's nice, but you just keep on going because it's bigger than that. If you're goal oriented, sometimes you say, what do I do next? Okay, pick up on that one and take us to a new level, James.
Well, I mean, first of all, this is coming from someone who was very goal oriented for a long time. I think in a lot of ways, everything I write in Atomic Habits is actually a little reminder to myself. I make all of these same mistakes that everybody else makes. And so I kind of am coming up with these ideas because I need them. But I came across this sheet of paper a couple years ago, and it had a list of goals that I had written out to myself, like maybe 10 years prior. And it was kind of interesting looking through them with that much distance from them, because maybe 30% of the list or something were things that I had accomplished. And then the rest of the list were things I hadn't. And my first thought looking at it was, well, clearly writing the goal down wasn't the thing that made the difference. Like obviously if that would have been the secret, then I should have just hit them all. And what I realized looking at it was the ones that I made progress on were the ones that I had some kind of system around. And we often tell these stories about behavior change and habits and how hard it is to build new habits, how difficult it is to change your behavior and all of that. And one of the stories that we will tell is something like, well, maybe if you really wanted it, maybe if you had better goals, maybe if you had more discipline, maybe if you had more grit. And, I don't know that that's quite right. Certainly those are important qualities in life. But I think many people, certainly most people like listening to this conversation right now, genuinely do want to improve, genuinely do want to perform at a high level. So what I would say is if you're struggling to improve, the problem isn't you. The problem is your system. We don't change, not because we don't want to change, but because we have the wrong system for change. And I think we can even go a step further and say, listen, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. So often in life, we're told you need to be more ambitious, set a bigger goal, think bigger, 10x your vision. And thinking big has its place. Like I consider myself to be someone who thinks big, but the truth is setting the goal is kind of the easy part. Like I'm an author, right? Like I could set a goal to sell 100 million books. It took me 3 seconds. Like the goal is not the hard part. It's building a system of behaviors that executes and carries you toward that outcome. And so what I would say is, if I was going to put a little finer point on this language, what do I mean by goal and system? Your goal is your desired outcome, the target, the thing you're shooting for. What is your system? It's the collection of daily habits that you follow. And if there is ever a gap between your goal and your system, if there's ever a gap between your desired outcome and your daily habits will always win. Almost by definition, your current habits are perfectly designed to deliver your current results. So whatever system you've been running, whatever collection of habits you've been following for the last, say, 6 months or year or 2 years, it's carried you almost inevitably to the outcomes that you have right now. And that's kind of one of the great ironies of life. We also badly want better results. We also badly want to make more money or reduce stress or be more productive or get in shape. But the results are not actually the thing that needs to change. It's like fix the inputs and the outputs will fix themselves. Design a better system, create a better collection of daily habits, and you'll be carried kind of naturally to a different destination. And that's why sometimes I'll say, like, goals are for people who care about winning once. Systems are for people who care about winning repeatedly. If you want to get results again and again, then it's the system that drives you forward. So that's kind of my little take on systems and goals.
I love what you just said there. That was great. I'll I'll write that down and give you credit somewhere.
Sounds great. That's great.
Let's stay a little bit kind of in that same territory, because one of the things I loved about Atomic Habits, James, it makes sense. It just makes sense. When you read it, you not only can understand it and apply it, it makes sense. And when you talked about the difference between becoming outcome-based or identity-based on goals and where you're going, when I read that whole section, I thought that is right and reasonable. And, you know, I've got a cigarette habit and I'm trying to quit smoking versus I don't smoke. I mean, that I felt was just very impacting. So take us there a little bit, would you please?
Well, I think this is pretty natural. I certainly have done it many times before. A lot of the time when you want to change something or get a better result, you'll sit down and first you start thinking about, what do I want to achieve? So what outcome do I want? And then if you go a little bit beyond just dreaming about the outcome, you say, okay, well, I need some kind of plan. I need some sort of process for this. And so you might say, just as an example, I want to lose 40 pounds. And so my plan is I'm going to go to the gym 4 days a week and I'm going to eat this new diet and so on. And usually it kind of stops there. And the implicit assumption kind of behind all of this is, if I can follow this plan and get that result, then I'll be the kind of person that I want to be, or I'll be happier with who I am, or I'll be more satisfied with my results or something like that. And what I encourage in chapter 2 of the book is, let's maybe flip that on its head for a minute and just say, hey, why don't we just start by asking ourselves, not what do I want to achieve, but rather who do I wish to become? And then you can build your habits around that identity and let that process kind of carry you forward. And then whatever results happen to bubble up along the way are the results that come along the way. And so I sort of think of it kind of like the layers of an onion. The outermost layer is your outcomes. One layer in is your process. And then the core of the onion is your identity. And what I've found is that, and I think many readers would agree with this, the concept of trying to build identity-based habits, of starting with who do you wish to become, is more resilient for them because they can kind of carry it around from situation to situation. So for example, one reader, she had this concept of this identity of, what would a healthy person do? And then whenever she walked around, she would just ask herself that question all day. What would a healthy person do? Would they order the salad or order the burger and fries? What would a healthy person do? Would they walk, 5 blocks to the next meeting, or would they catch a cab, or, whatever? And they can walk around all day long with that kind of identity in their mind. And that gives them a lens to make their daily decisions. And they start to feel more aligned with becoming the kind of person they want to be. Now, my big takeaway for this, and I think the way in which it ties into all of the concepts in Atomic Habits and the strategies for building small habits and getting better, is that your behavior provides evidence of your identity. And so every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you wish to become. So no, doing one push-up does not transform your body, but it does cast a vote for, I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. And no, writing one sentence may not finish the novel, but it does cast a vote for, I'm a writer. And individually, those actions are small things, but collectively you start to build up this body of evidence for the type of person you are and what you stand for. And ultimately, I think this is the real reason that habits matter, which is they provide evidence for who you are. We often talk about habits as mattering because of the external results they'll get you. Hey, they'll help you make more money or reduce stress or whatever. But the real reason they matter is they shape your sense of self. They kind of shape that narrative, that story that you have about who you are and what you do. And habits are not the only things in life that influence that picture or that story. But by virtue of being repeated day in and day out, habits provide the bulk of the evidence. They play a really significant role in shaping the way you see yourself. And so once you start to believe that you're that kind of person, you have every reason in the world to stick with the behavior, especially once you take pride in it. I always joke, if you take pride in the size of your biceps, you never skip arm day at the gym, And once you start to take pride in a certain habit, it becomes easier to stick to it. Like the person who views themselves as, I am a runner, they don't have to motivate themselves to go for a run in the same way that somebody who's just getting started might. It's kind of like, no, like this is just part of what I normally do. It's part of who I am. And so ultimately, I think that's where we're trying to get to. Now, it's hard to flip a switch on day one and just change your identity overnight. It usually doesn't happen that way. It's a gradual thing. It requires the casting of many votes, to continue that metaphor, and building up a body of evidence. But I do think it's possible. And a lot of the other tools and strategies in the book maybe can give you the short-term motivation that you need to get to that long-term place of kind of reshaping your story or shaping your identity.
I know the one thing in this day of my day, this day number 2 for today, is this podcast is going to be a change for me. It's going to make a difference. And let me tell you why. It's not just the 19 one mores. It's not just the book that I'm in the middle of, but it's these concepts that are really radically changing the way that I engage in productivity. You have one more that I want to hit. Now, again, there's about 16 more in the book, podcast listeners, viewers, but you have one more that I want you to unpack for me right here, Ed, before we say goodbye. This idea of goals and standards. You're rocking my thoughts here on how you are viewing the difference between goals and standards. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I wrote them back to back. I have a goal setting chapter, and John's better at teaching this than I am, but I have a pretty specific system on setting goals. But I think if you're setting the right types of goals, you're not going to hit all of them all the time. But I think ultimately in life, long term, you do get all of your standards. Your standards it's teaching people how to treat you. Your standards are what you're going to get. And for me, I'll give you 2 things on this. First, when I was young and I had no self-confidence whatsoever, I built this philosophy that if I could just start to keep the promises I made to myself, I could build some baseline confidence. I think for the most part, if you lack self-confidence, you lack a reputation and relationship with yourself where you trust you. And I didn't trust me as a young person, even as a young adult. And I said, I got to start keeping the promises I make to myself. And they were small. When I'm going to get up, how much water I'm going to drink a day, how many contacts I'm going to make in a given day, when I'm going to pray. And these are things I could control if I was going to work out. And all of a sudden, I started keeping these small promises I made to myself, and I built some confidence. And then I thought, well, if I can do these small things, I'm going to point my mind at the big things. And I believed I could do them all of a sudden. And then once I did that, I thought, well, how can I become super productive? I got to change the standard. And the standard is no longer I do what I say I'm going to do. It's I do what I say I'm going to do. And the new standard is and one more. So if I say I'm going to get on the treadmill for 30 minutes, I do 30 minutes and one more. If I'm going to make 10 contacts in a day, I make that promise of 10 and I do one more. If I'm going to tell my daughter Bella I love her every day, and now I keep that promise to myself, I do it and I tell her one more time every day. And all of a sudden, that standard has changed who I am. You stack up all those one mores. John, your great friend Art Williams, who's another hero of mine, had this amazing saying that I'm sure he still says. And he used to say the difference, and you said it earlier, the difference between winning and losing is so small, it's almost too scary to talk about. And he would say this, and I'd say, well, then tell me what the thing is. What's the small thing? And he never told you. But I was looking for it all these years, and I believe I know what it is. I believe it's one more.
Yeah, it's a fact.
That's the difference. I believe it's the difference.
You're so right on. In fact, Art and I were having a conversation the other day, and he and I are both swimmers, and he said, I swim every day an hour and 1 minute, and I just cracked up because it's the one more concept you're talking about right now. And he said, I never swim 59 minutes. I never swim 1 hour. He said, I swim 1 hour and 1 minute. He said, everything I do is just one more. I mean, it's just exactly where your book is. In fact, I'm sitting here and I'm less than a half a mile from his house right now because he's a neighbor of mine. But I love it. 1 hour and 1 minute, one more, just like you're talking, Ed.
Well, today's topic, we're going to talk about, I think I love where we're going. We're going to do a little mini series here. Mm-hmm. I think there's 3 books that for what we do in organizational development and culture and working with teams that really stand out when it comes to that. One, obviously being the 5 levels of leadership. Right. That's our methodology. The second one is Leaders' Greatest Return. It's really talking about developing people and the power of that. And the third one is leaderships. These are shifts that leaders have to make often. And so today's topic is why leaders have to make the shift from goals to growth. So I love where we're going on this around leadership.
Yeah, the whole idea about shifts that a leader needs to make comes up quite a bit in coaching conversations. One that I think we've done a podcast on it before was on, and it's number one, the first shift in when you read the book, about making the shift from being a soloist to being a conductor. And so that if you're used to, you're an individual contributor and you're really good at what you do, and one day they tap you and say, hey, we'd like you to lead the department or lead a team. Now you're the conductor of that orchestra. You're not just playing in that orchestra. It's a completely shift in how you think and how you act to get not just your own performance, but to get performance from others. So I thought leadership, as well as some of these shifts that we're going to cover in the next couple of episodes, will be things that I see quite a bit.
And as leaders, we have to be open to change, and we have to be changing. And that's why I love this. Like, we should always be thinking about the shifts that we're making. So today we're going to talk about where the shift from goals to growth that John's going to lead us through with this content pieces that we're just going to kind of take back and forth here. And when you start out as a leader, we talk about this in the 5 levels of leadership, where we get a position and then what do? We immediately want to just start producing. We want to start hitting our KPIs, and we make a mistake to where we kind of maybe don't grow, but we also just kind of jump right over connecting with our people. And so we think that kind of hitting our numbers and the KPIs, whatever your KPIs might be, will make you a better leader. It'll increase your value. And while it does, and from an external standpoint, really from an internal standpoint, you got to be growing on the inside to be able to keep producing and growing outside and hitting those KPIs. And so we are big here at Maxwell Leadership about it being a growth focus versus a goal focus.
Yeah, I love that shift from growth outward to growth inward.
It's good.
I mean, to me, that's saying if you shoot for goals, that you'll achieve the goals, but you may not grow. And it's funny, that meeting I had this morning with the client, they're talking about we get so focused on the scoreboard, on the revenue or the expenses or whatever what your measurement is, we forget to look at the daily growth that we're making as individuals to work toward that. So how do you make this leadership? And so I don't think it's 5, I think it's maybe 7.
Doggone it.
I know you're being disappointed in me. But number one, embracing change, that growth means change. And if you want to become a better leader and a better person, then you have to shift from this fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And mindset really is important in this shift. I think that I've got to be. We talked a little bit on the previous podcast about fixed versus growth. Carol Dweck and the research she does, but I can't say enough for having that mindset that I'm here to grow.
Yeah,
everything I do.
Yeah, and I remember what I just said a minute ago. Having influence and being a leader, it doesn't require change. Change is going to happen, right? So get ready for it. And we have this phrase that we say where if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance a whole lot less. And so you just need to be aware of that and know that that's going to happen. And so you got to embrace it, as Perry talked about, as we begin to think about this from a growth standpoint. And the fixed mindset leaders, they don't like it. They don't like necessarily the change. And so they think it leads to, well, it's about failure and I am failing and I need to change. All those things that kind of go with that when we hear the word change and how does it affect me? Versus if we have a growth mindset, back on this mindset thing about change, then we'll embrace the change. We'll embrace the learning and the growth that we will go through. I mean, you think about this, anything that we change or do a little bit differently, at the end of the day, we've learned something vergoing having that repetitive
doesn't mean
mindset.
We like change any more than anybody else.
No, not at all. Yeah.
But I see it in a different light, is that I'm going to go, and you think about it, your whole life is about change. You wouldn't be where you are if you didn't change. Yeah. So, but we look at it with a different view. You say, I'm going to go through this because I'll be better on the other side.
I mean, the only reason that we now have over 3 million downloads is because you heard my very first one and you said, Chris, I think we need to embrace change.
I love you.
So I've grown through this process, and I give all that credit to you And what we've created today, though, right? Like just continually changing. So
right. Well, the word that you made me think of is the word teachable. That you,
there we go. Yeah, there we go. And so our next point here, great segue.
You were
right?
so teachable.
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic characteristic for a leader. And so, the question I always ask people on a coaching call, how teachable are you? And so how do you become more teachable if you decide and I think it builds trust with people when you say, when they view you as a teachable leader, that you don't have all the answers. You're always seeking to learn more. You're asking them to help you grow. You're observing. You're curious. Lots of things like that. But you're looking for growth opportunities in every situation. You ask questions. You are curious. You seek out information from others. You file. John's big about filing what you've learned so that you can recall it. And then my favorite is passing on what I'm learning to others. I notice that the more I teach people, the more sticks with me to do that. So,
real quick, before you go to the next point, one of the things I was thinking about under this and having a teachable spirit and being okay with the failure side of things, which that's a strong word, but just the whole teachable spirit. We talk about the success cycle to where John talks about, hey, listen, try something, right? You're going to fail, then you're going to learn, then you're going to improve, then re-enter again. And so whether it's this podcast, whether it's leading a meeting, whether it's a new process or a system, be teachable through understanding that that's going to be a success cycle and a process that you're going to go through. Try it. Know you're going to fail. What are you going to learn? Be teachable through that. Then improve it and then re-enter and do it again.
I'm smiling because I was in a meeting yesterday and one of our teammates asked me, didn't you write about this on a podcast or a blog? I went, yeah, let's pull that up. And I pulled it up, and as she was looking at it, I was looking at it, I go, did I write this? It was like episode 12 or something.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. I go, oh my gosh.
At least it wasn't one when you said, hey, look, can we do this together?
All right.
Okay.
Hey, podcast listeners, do you have a clear plan for growth? Achieving big results most often does not require big life changes. Small improvements over time compound into big results. Download Clear by Maxwell Leadership. It's the new free app where our expert guides help you pace your leadership journey and set a clear plan for your growth. You can also find all sorts of resources on the Clear app, including this podcast, and information on upcoming events such as our International Maxwell Conference this August. This upcoming conference will be like no other, so be sure to download Clear by Maxwell Leadership in your app store and register today.
Okay, number 3, make your love for learning greater than your fear of failure. I thought that was an interesting teaching to say, how big is this fear that I may have that I might not get it right? That can I make that idea that I want to grow? I'm willing to grow greater than that. Don't count losses. He says, John says, don't count losses, count lessons. I thought that was pretty good.
I love that. Don't count losses, count the lessons. Because what do? Naturally, as human beings in the flesh, we go, man, I don't have this anymore. I lost that, or I didn't do this right. Versus, man, I learned this and I learned that. So I absolutely love that, which goes into a book, that John wrote. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
Yep.
And I just think it's a powerful lesson. Well, number 4 is develop relationships with other growing people. This may be one of the strongest points that we're going to talk about today, because a rising tide raises all boats. And I know I've had the privilege of working in and around this organization for a long time, over 23, 24 years. I started when I was 5. And just being around this environment, we're in a bubble, is what we call it. It's a leadership bubble. We're challenging personal growth all the time. But I think when you're around these type of people, the easier it is for you to grow and to get, and because it becomes contagious. And so be the difference maker. Take that step and be that person for your team or your organization, and bring people around you. I was talking the other day with somebody, and we started talking about the fact that if you look at the people that you're hanging out with, what are the conversations about? Are they all about, man, you remember remember when we did that? Remember when it was this? Or, man, this is what I'm learning, and this is where I'm going, and this is what I'm trying. That right there, just the next conversation you're in when you go out, for a social event, you're hanging out with couples or people where, just be aware of that and listen to that and the tone of the conversation, because you want to be around those that are saying, man, this is what I'm learning, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm reading, you do that all the time to me, right? Like, this is what, I was reading this book the other day, I was listening to this and I learned that, and I'm just like, holy cow. So it just encourages me to be growing.
But that's two-way. And I was just thinking the same thing, is that you do that to me and our team. We're looking at what are you learning this week? What are you reading?
Yeah.
And a week doesn't go by somebody asks me, what are you reading now? Even my coaching clients are now saying, hey, what should I be reading?
Yeah.
So that, because we're in these conversations that we all realize we've got some growth to do.
Yeah.
Number 5, develop greater humility. Remember, we're going from goals to growth. How do I develop more humility? And this humility is really about the essence of being unafraid to admit when we're wrong or what we don't know, and being able to, it's like self-awareness and humility kind of tied in together here, about recognizing the gap that I could be filling by spending some time each day investing in me.
Yeah.
And when I admit that I'm wrong, then I'm on a path to discover what's right, and it just opens me up to learning more.
Which this is about self-awareness and being having that humility to be open to that, and that feedback from other people, maybe also some tools. We often will talk to leaders and say, hey, the longer that you have led, you've been with the team, maybe you're in that fixed mindset, right? You're in that goal mindset, probably the more unaware you are of really what's going on,
right.
The pace of your growth, the pace of your leadership, what does it look like to be on the other side of your leadership? And so I think that humility side and the self-awareness is something that you should really look at when it comes to moving from goals to growth. Number 6, believe in yourself. This is just really about, do you believe that you're worth it? You listen to a podcast, you maybe listen to an Audible book, maybe you attend a workshop, maybe you begin some coaching. Like, believe in yourself, to invest in yourself and what you're learning. And when you believe in yourself and you invest in yourself, you'll begin to move from goals to growth.
Yeah, and the last one, I really would love your opinion on this before I let you wrap it up. But John used a phrase, and I thought it was interesting, about embrace layered learning.
Yeah.
And to me, you just gave a one part of that, which is, how do I do learning? Am I doing podcasts? Am I looking at books? But I'm also, for me, it's so much of what we do. I'm studying and I'm learning and I'm investing in me, and then I go out and apply it. I do experience and I try something, and I do it on a coaching call, or I do it in front of an audience. In my world, so much I do a lesson and I get feedback, and now I'm adding to that. So I feel like I'm layering. But I wonder, how do you see layered learning when John speaks of that?
Yeah, so this is just a continuous growth mindset, period. Piling on. This encompasses everything that we just talked about. Whereas if the previous 6, if you're doing them well and you're moving from goals to growth, what's going to end up happening is you're just going to continue to see growth principles and movement, right, laying on top of each other. And so you're going to continue to see that layered learning, which hey, take a chance, take a risk, learn something, and then you're going to learn something more. And then but if you never take that step and begin learning, you'll never have the opportunity to experience layered learning.
Yeah. I think, Coach Bill Walsh years ago, San Francisco 49ers, but he had a phrase that kind of upset people, because he said, the score will take care of itself. And I thought, no, you're the head coach. That's all we're about, is the score. And he said, no, if you do these, if you invest in yourself, if you do the right things, if you are brilliant on the basics, if you're learning and growing and improving and growing and improving and growing and improving, score will take care of itself. I thought, isn't that true? And we get so focused on the goal, the scoreboard, that we don't do the daily things we should be doing.
Yeah.
And that the goals will take care of themselves.
John Maxwell is going to give you some things that will help you become better. Here is John.
Improving yourself is the first step of improving everything else in your life. And here's what I learned. That the goals that I achieved were not as important as the growth that I received. The goals help me do better, but growth helps me be better. And if you don't go to the next level, you grow to the next level. If you go to the next level, you may not have the competency to continue growing. But anytime you grow to the next level, it is a natural, organic life that allows you to keep going. You want to grow to where you're going, not go without that growth. Because growth on the inside feeds growth on the outside. All of your goals will be reached during that growth process. So when I became growth-oriented, I made two major changes, okay? And this is going to be really practical for you. Because when I said, okay, I'm not, now, by the way, I've reached a lot of goals, but I don't set goals. I'm passionate about growth. And so when I started transferring from a goal person to a growth person, there's something I immediately discovered, and that was, and I'm going to there were two changes I made. The first change is this. I changed from growth in everything to growth in essential things. In other words, the goal is not to get you to know everything and grow in every area. The goal is for you to grow in what I've been calling today the everyday essentials. In the beginning of my growth, I was trying to learn everything. And I was realizing that learning everything isn't going to help me at all. And a whole bunch of stuff that I'm learning is not going to contribute at all to my success or significance in life. So I began to understand that I was going to have to narrow down the areas that I grew in. I had to forget about knowing everything, and I had to focus on knowing the essential things. Now, this took me a considerable amount of time. It's not going to take me much time to teach it to you, but this took me 18 months because I kept trying out different things. And is this essential for my success? And I would discover, well, no, it's not. It's good, but it's not essential. So I'd put it aside. And so what took me 18 months to discover, I'm going to give it to you now, because we're going to spend the rest of our time on 5 things. But the 5 things we're going to spend the rest of our time on, I'm going to promise you that's all the return that you need to be successful in life and significant will be given to you through these 5 areas. They're the 5 essentials. These aren't like things that you should get to someday or perhaps try out sometime. I've got it figured out. These are the essentials. And you just take the word clear, C-L-E-A-R. Because each letter represents a different word. The letter C is communication. The L is leadership. The E is equipping. The A is attitude. And the R is relationships. If you can excel in those 5 areas, you will excel in any business that you ever engage in. That's a fact. So the first change I made was I'm not going to grow in everything. I'm just going to grow in the essential things. And by the way, if we were in Q&A, you would find that I don't do what you do most of your days. Most of the things that you do every day, I never do. Not because they're wrong. There's nothing wrong. It's just not in my essentials. And if I'm doing something that's not essential, it's not going to give me the return I want. Trust me, it's not wrong. It's even good. It's just not essential. The second change I made with this growth mindset is I started to have growth with a timeline. I had growth with a timeline, and I changed it to growth without a finish line. I took the timeline out of my growth system. Because in the beginning, everything I did, I'd say, okay, I'll get this done at this certain time. And I was putting deadlines and timelines on my growth. Well, let me tell you where it started. It started when I heard Earl Nightingale. Earl Nightingale said something one time. I was in my 20s. He said, if you'll spend 1 hour a day, every day, on one subject and only one subject. He says, an hour every day on that subject. In 5 years, you'll become an expert on the subject. And I was at that time very passionate about leadership because I had come to the conclusion everything rises and falls on leadership. And so I'm 20, what would I be? I was probably 26. And when Earl Nightingale said, if I spend 1 hour a day, every day on one subject for 5 years, I'd be an expert on it, I said, I'm going to do that with leadership. And that's exactly what I did. Every day, 1 hour. Read leadership, talk to leaders, ask leadership questions, do leadership projects every day. And now leadership, leadership, leadership. And Earl Nightingale said, 5 years, I could be an expert. 5 years. Wow. So I started my growth journey like Cape Canaveral. I did a countdown. 5, 4, 3. I'm going to blast off. I'm going to be a leader, an expert leader. Halfway through the 5 years, halfway through the countdown, and every day I'd say, how long will it take? Well, how long will it take? Well, Earl said 5 years. Oh, how long will it take? 5? I'm in my second year, 4 years. How long will it take? How long will it take? And halfway through that 5 years, I began to change. And I began to change because I was practicing leadership on a daily basis, and I was learning to lead, and I was becoming a better leader, and more people were joining my team, and I was starting to have leadership success, and the thrill of growth, the joy of seeing where I was and now where I am, the understanding now that if I was intentional in my personal growth, my life would get wonderfully better, and feeling the exhilaration of growing and learning and improving. About halfway through that 5 years, how long will it take? How long will it take? How long will it take? One day I said, I'm never going to ask that question again because I'm growing. I'm getting better. In fact, I changed the question from how long will it take to how far can I go? How far can I go? And by the way, I was asking that question at 26. Can I tell you something? At 76, I'm still asking that question. How far can I go? I have no idea. I'm not even there. I'm not even close to being there. Oh my gosh. I understand my father, who worked full time up through the age of 95, when we were having lunch one day at 92, and he's looking at me, he's 92, and he said, son, he said, I've been thinking about my life, and he said, I believe my greatest days are still ahead. He's 92. My greatest days are still ahead. Some people are 22 and can't say that. And and when I started writing books, I thought, I wonder when there'll be a day that I'll not be creative, and I wonder when there'll be a day when I sit down. I write with a 4-color pen on a legal pad. I write all my books out by hand, and I said, I wonder if there'll be a day when I'll sit down and there's just nothing there. And what I've discovered is it's never happened, and the list gets longer of things I want to write. You see, when you live in this growth world, in this creative world, when you're in the game every day, you never run out of fuel. In fact, you don't understand it. The more you give, the more you receive. And there's, there's just like this abundance that begins to happen. And now I'm looking at it, and I've got more books to write than I've ever had to write. And I think, I may have to live to be 200. I don't know what's going to happen here. You understand? But one of the books I'm going to write is going to be entitled, Is There a Finish Line? It's going to be a great book. I wouldn't write anything else. Is there a finish line? And it's going to be a question, because for most people, the answer is yes. For most people, there's a finish line. In this business right here, when people sometimes they make enough money to take care of their needs, they say, well, this is all I wanted, this is all I need, and so they just stop. Sometimes people say, well, at this age, I think I'll retire. I don't know. So for most people, they have a finish line. I have none. I have none. Because here's what I know about a self-imposed finish line. And by the way, any finish line that you have, you put it there. So don't look at me. You put it there. There was some time in your life you said, at that age, I'm done. When I get that much, I'm done. Let me say this. You perhaps don't know this, but if you have a superimposed finish line, self-imposed, when you cross that line, you're finished. What part of that do you not understand?
So my first question for you, Mark, is how do you as a leader see or determine when the goals that you have maybe are beyond the growth of yourself or of your team? And what do you do about that?
Yeah, so I have this philosophy on goals. It's been shaped by John. I've ran John's companies now for 14 years. And before that, I was a contributor for another 10 years of helping John and the companies be successful. And certainly I've done that with goals, financial aspirations, personal goals. I've become a better parent. I've become a better spouse to my wife because of goals. So it's sometimes when you talk about being growth-oriented, not goal-oriented, it's almost like we hear, let's just throw goals out. That's never what John or any of us believe. But the true indicator of our success, I believe, is about growth. That's why we can talk about getting a return on failure. That's why we can talk about being bigger on the inside than the outside, is because there is this growth-oriented way about the way that we approach success, the way we approach momentum. But let me say this about goals, just because we're talking about this for a moment.
Yeah.
I love setting goals that I'll never reach. Now, I had a teammate one time, a CFO, that would chastise me and say, if you don't hit the goal that you set, you lose credibility. Why would you set a goal that you're not going to hit, a financial projection, a financial goal? And I absolutely understood what he meant. Because we should, if we're going to put something down that we're going to accomplish as business leaders, we should hold ourselves accountable, responsible for hitting that goal. But the reason I love to set goals that I miss is because I have found I accomplish more when I set a goal that has an only God component to it. God's got to show up for us to hit this goal. And I have found that we have been able to accomplish more as an aspirational goal than an achievable goal. And so when I'm doing finances and I'm spending money and I'm building teams and making sure that we hit it, I hit an attainable goal. But in every other area of my life, or most of other area of my life, I set aspirational goals. Goals that will challenge me to do more than I would do if I just set an attainable goal. So that's kind of my little piece there, Tracy, because I do believe in goals. I do set goals, but the object and certainly the subject of this lesson is about growth.
So it's not necessarily about having a goal that's too big for yourself or for your team, but setting a goal that is something that you also have a growth plan so that you and your team can grow to that goal necessarily. Because I think sometimes people set goals, but then they don't necessarily have a growth plan for how they can grow into that. So I think when you talk about, if you could expand on that a little bit, like when you talk about an only God component, there needs to be a practical side, which is what John goes right into, and that is the clear plan. So if you could share a little bit with maybe some of our first-time listeners or people who have been listening to us for a while, but they aren't sure about our clear growth plan and how somebody can set maybe a God-only goal, but then they also want to have a growth plan for how they and their team can grow toward that big goal.
Yeah, Tracy, I love this question. I love this angle that you're going, because I just mentioned earlier in the lesson comments that I'm getting ready to do my year-end review. And it's where I go review what I set out to do in the current year, the end of the current year that we're in. and move toward what I'm projecting to do in the next year. And I remember 3 years into this process that now is 21 years old. It's finally an adult, Tracy. My year-end review process is 21 years old. And I remember 3 years into this process, I had set a lot of ideas and thoughts out there. And that third year, back when I was 33, I felt compelled to set some very tangible goals for the next 12 years. I was 33 and I set some life goals that were aspirational, absolutely, but they were tangible too. I would know whether I hit them or not. And so I was 33 and I said, by the time I am 45, I want to accomplish X. And I listed 42 things. Tracy, I listed things like I wanted to 10X. I wanted to make 10 times more my current salary. I laugh about that now because I should have put a lot more because I was getting paid dirt by Enjoy back then, okay? John was in close conflict to child labor laws, and I wasn't even a child. They were not paying me hardly anything. And then I was single at the time, but I had been with Stephanie at the point, and I said, I want to get married. And I even put on there, I put 42 things, but one of the things I put on there is I wanted to have 5 children. What I didn't realize, Tracy, at 33, that it takes 2 people to make that decision, okay? And so for years, I've laughed about it and said, literally, 42 things with that level of specifics. I wanted to be the leader of John Maxwell's company by the time I was 45. 42% of the things that I set as a telemarketer at 33 years of age with great specifics, I accomplished before I was 45. 82%. And I would talk about that, and I've shared stories about that. Perhaps I've shared that on the podcast. One that I had not accomplished, just a quick little funny side note, one that I had not accomplished was 5 children, because when Stephanie and I got married, she went, hey, bud, had a tough pregnancy, not doing it again. Hope you still want to get married. I went, yeah, I want to still get married. Of course, Macy came along 2 years later. So for years, we've had 2 daughters, and I went, well, it's 82% because I only have 5 children. Well, about a year ago, Stephanie and I have been able to play an active role in our grandchildren's life. And so guess how many kids are in our home every single day right now? 5 kids. Even my kid projection made it. So I'm now at 86% of the things that I said. But here's my point. Thanks for letting me have fun, number one. But here's my point. I absolutely believe in attainable, achievable, quantifiable, know that you hit it goals. I absolutely do, and every year. And coming up for 2024, for those of you that are listening to this real time, I will have tangible goals for 2024 that I will know if I hit or missed. But don't miss the point of this lesson in that the most important goal that you should have is a growth goal. Because John says that growth will make you better and goals will make you do better. You want to be better so that you can do more than you ever did. And I can tell you this because I have been more conscious about growth than I have goals. I've accomplished more with my life in shorter period of time than I ever would have if I'd have stuck with just goals and not made it about growth. Growth guarantees a better tomorrow. Always make sure that you're growing, and then you have tangible growth ideas or growth objectives to support that growth.
I want to talk to you about how a leader develops the character of a winner. This is a very important lesson because there are people that are kind of inclined to success because they have a lot of good ability. But what we discover is sometimes that the detriment to the ability that we have that would give us success is the fact that we lack character, we lack values, we lack on the inside those things which would help us take the good, strong, long, successful journey. So let's talk a little bit about character and how do you develop in a winner? I'm still reminded of my friend Truett Cathy, who has built a great restaurant company in the United States called Chick-fil-A. And to be honest with you, in the fast food industry, they're number one. Everybody knows that nobody does it like Chick-fil-A. And in the earlier days when Chick-fil-A was growing, but they probably had potential to grow a lot faster than they were, Truett Cathy, the founder, was sitting around with the board, and the board kept saying to Truett, let's get bigger, let's have more stores, let's get bigger. And Truett Cathy looked at them and said, no, let's get better. And they kind of looked at him for a moment and thought, what do you mean by that? He said, well, here's what I know. If we get better, the customers will demand that we get bigger. He was exactly right. You see, Truett Cathy was thinking about the character of the company. He knew that if you are better on the inside, you'll become better on the outside. That if you're bigger on the inside, you'll become bigger on the outside. And that's what character is all about. So how do I develop character in my people to help them be successful? Number one, I would encourage you to get a personal definition of success. Now, success is very subjective, so if I ask you what success is, you'd give me a different answer than perhaps the person beside you. Success is very subjective. But I want to challenge you to get a personal definition of success that is inward. Start with the inside. Start with the character. Get a character definition of success. For example, mine. It's very simple. As I look at successful people, and as a young person, I was beginning to experience some of that success. I was watching some of them literally fall down, fail, get out of the business. And I kept thinking they were doing so well, what happened? And what happened is they had an outward definition of success. They had goals to reach, money they wanted to make, but they never started with the inside first. And so I developed an inside definition of success, which is those closest to me, those who know me the best, they're the ones who respect me the most. It's very simple, isn't it? The people that know me well, my family, my close friends, they know me. They know my strengths. They know my weaknesses. They know what I do well. They know what I don't well, but they love and respect me the most. Why is that? Because I'm a person of character. That became my inward definition of success. Now, I want you to get that for yourself, and I want you to teach your people on your team. You need an inward definition of success because you can't travel without till you're traveled within. The inside determines the outside. And so it's very important for me to have a personal inside definition of success, which will now allow me to travel outside. Now, the moment that I get my inside definition of success, those who are closest to me, love and respect me the most. Now I can get an outward definition of success. For me, it's knowing my purpose in life, growing in my maximum potential, and sowing seeds that benefit others. But get the inside definition first. That's how you develop character and help your people to really win from the inside first. Number two, learn and live good values. Values are what give you stability. As we went through COVID, I have 7 companies, and my CEO, Mark Cole, and I sat down and he said, John, with COVID and uncertainty, what's going to happen to our companies? I said, I don't know. I said, in 12 months, we could lose it all. It's okay. I said, here's what we need to know. Let's keep our values intact. Let's follow our values. We don't give up our values. We hold to them, especially during crisis. Let's value our people. Let's take care of them. Let's make sure we do the right thing. I said, if we all go under, we all go under together. But let's make sure that we keep our values intact. So when you learn good values and you live good values, wow, you just become more valuable. I wrote a book called Change Your World. It's a life-changing book. If you get a chance, pick it up. It will teach you all about this character on the inside, the values on the inside, which so determine the success on the outside. The third way that you develop characters that allow them to become winners in life is to teach them that everything worthwhile is uphill. It's all uphill. There's nothing quick about it. There's nothing easy about it. There's nothing that just, quote, happens. There's no luck about it at all. It's all uphill. You have to be intentional to climb this hill. You've got to give energy every day to this. You've got to expect adversity, difficulties, hardship, all of your dreams, everything. It's all uphill. It's right up here. Now, once you teach people that, then when they have adversity, they don't think that they've done something wrong or that they're an exception. They say, well, John said it would be uphill all the way. He said it wouldn't be easy. He said it would take a long time. He said there were no quick fixes. There were no easy answers. Wow. The difference between people who succeed and people who don't is quite simple. Let me give it to you. People who succeed, they do what is right, and then they feel good. People who do not succeed, people who fail, they want to feel good before they do what is right. Those are two totally different worlds. Remember, everything worthwhile is uphill. What does that mean? For the people on your team, encourage them that the first battle they must win is the battle with themselves. Then they can take care of the outward battles. The most first victory you want them to have is a personal self-victory. Then they can have victory with others and for others. I think developing character in your personal life and in the life of your team is what's going to help you get through the difficult times. And when other people fall off, your people stay the course. Why? Because they're bigger on the inside than they are on the outside. Because they're better on the inside than they are on the outside.
I want to talk about what Gene Veneer said. He's a Catholic philosopher, and he said growth begins when we begin to accept our own weakness. Mm-hmm. And the whole time I'm listening to John, it's the beginning of a new year. You and I, we've grown a lot together. Yeah. And I'm glad to be launching 2022 with you, ready to grow and learn some things together.
Well, I think it's interesting because you said we've grown a lot together. I don't think we've had a choice, right? Like when you work in this environment, oftentimes we talk about being in a leadership bubble around here, and we take it for granted because with John and his mentoring of us and encouraging of us, again, we didn't have a choice to be able to do that. And so I'm super excited to kind of talk about this with you and talk about the difference because so many people as leaders and organizations individually, they have goals, but they don't necessarily think about it from a growth standpoint, right? They goal mindset versus growth mindset. Yeah. So let's kick it off this way, because when I think about lofty goals, you've given me lofty goals as one of your leaders. I've seen John give you even loftier goals to accomplish what's filtered down. And oftentimes when leaders are given lofty goals or put lofty goals out there, they get frustrated over this big lofty goal. And instead of looking at it as a growth process to get to that goal, they just look at it as a goal, which is frustrating, versus begin thinking about how do I grow to that lofty goal. So again, I want to go back to you personally first. Let's start with you personally. You work for a guy that challenges you every single minute. I was going to say every day, but it's every minute with lofty goals, lofty ideas, opportunities to add value to people. How do you personally receive those and stay on a growth process for yourself to be able to go after those?
Well, so I love the question, and I love it in the context of this lesson, because John obviously wants us in this lesson, and you and I have worked with him for 2 decades. John wants us to be growth conscious. I mean, he has a preference here. Yes. It's goal conscious, growth conscious. His preference, let's just state it if it's not clear to anybody watching or anybody listening. He wants you to be growth conscious. Yet we do talk about numbers. One of my favorite lines is when I'm introducing John, I said he sold 34 million copies of his books. How do we know? Because he's counting.
That's right.
Because he knows his numbers, and we've laughed about that. Some of my most embarrassing moments is to give John an update, and I give him the wrong update, and he goes, no, I think the real update is this.
He knows.
Going, how do you know? He knows his numbers. So do we run our business with numbers? Absolutely. Do we focus on objectives? I like to call them mile markers rather than goals. But do we focus on objectives that give indication of progress and growth and goals met? Yes. But I've got to tell you, pursuing audacious goals in John Maxwell's environment, for me personally, is a lot easier than pursuing goals, perhaps for many of you watching today or listening, because a lot of organizations, they focus so much on goals that goals become more important than growth. And I've got to tell you, I've missed some goals. We can talk about some of my biggest mistakes and missing the book launch of Intentional Living.
I knew that was the first one you were
We
going to
can
bring
talk
up.
about all that. And I'm lost, speaking of numbers, I lost $1.6 million with some bad decisions. We can talk about all that. But here's what I rest on, and what I want you as a leader in this organization to rest on, and what I want to challenge everybody watching, listening today. It is a lot easier to chase goals when you know growth is a greater objective than a goal.
That's true.
It's absolutely easier. So I have stretched to hit some big goals and actually hit some.
Yeah.
I've stretched to hit some goals and, be honest, missed it. But very rarely do we spend time on missed goals as long as there is an obvious growth objective that's been hit.
Yeah. And I often hear you say, hey, no problem. Tell me what you learned, right? Like, it's okay if we miss the goal. Now, listen, we're not in the business of missing goals, right? But when you do, that question that leaders you should have for yourself, you should have for your team, to show that you're a growth-minded leader or organization is, tell me what you learned. And John talks about this with evaluating your experiences. He doesn't say the experiences are positive or negative. He says evaluate all the experiences. And what I loved about what you just shared is that keeps you from being frustrated. We talk a lot about how do we perpetually learn? How do we become a product of the product? How do we consume and grow and learn in a way that we're not stuck?
Yeah.
And one thing that I've learned personally is if I'm not growing, I'm not being able to lead effectively and give proper mentoring or coaching, right? Can't give what you don't have. We talk about this. Now, listen, sometimes if I'm just going to be transparent, it's starting a new year. Let's just put it out there. I mean, I get tired of it sometimes, right? Like,
sure.
I don't want to listen to another. I'm not going to say podcast because you need to stay.
Not say podcast.
Not going to say podcast because you need to stay on this podcast. And I'm so excited you're starting off the new year with us to do that. But what I find is sometimes I just want to check out. And I do check out, right?
Yeah.
But then when I do check out, and maybe you come to me and you need an idea or a thought, or my team needs something, I go, I got nothing for you. Versus if I'm continually growing, I'm like, hey, this is what I heard the other day. This is what I learned this morning when I was listening to that book, whatever it was. And so I think that allows us to not get stuck as leaders.
It does. And so let me, you did such a great job of nailing all of that down for me. One thing I just want to underscore that you just said, you are more likely to learn on a missed growth opportunity than you are a missed goal opportunity. Because when we hit a goal, we're so fixated on something tangible that when that tangible doesn't happen, it shuts our emotional psyche down that we're not open to the lesson. But if we go in saying, I'm going to grow, there is a mindset that happens to make us open for the lesson even if we missed the objective.
That's right.
You go in goal conscious, and John didn't even really mention that in this particular lesson, but I've heard him mention it before. You go into something goal conscious, it's likely that you miss the goal, you won't get a lesson. You go into something growth conscious, it's likely that you're going to get a lesson even if you miss the objective.
Yeah. And building off what you just said, a thought came to mind. Wouldn't it also be true that by the time we get to that goal, at times it may even be outdated or obsolete, right? And if we're just focused on that, we're missing the whole point.
Well, Fritz now Octave from Kissimmee, Florida, he loves Minute with Maxwell and said, John, how about the word goal for today? That's a great word. I think every person that's with me today on Minute with Maxwell knows what a goal is. But let me tell you what I learned when I was in the 5th grade about the goal. I was beginning to be interested in basketball, and so I went to my father and asked him if he could build me a little basketball court. We already had a driveway and a garage, so it's kind of like, can you buy me a ball, and can we stick a backboard up there and put a rim there, and it's called basketball. My dad said, sure. And so he did get me a basketball. I dribbled around enjoying that, and he put up that backboard. He was just getting ready to put up the goal when he was called away on a kind of a business emergency for a day. And so he said, son, I'm going to be gone I'll be back tomorrow. And when I get back, I'll put up the goal I said, it's okay, Dad. I got my basketball, I got a backboard, I got a place to drill, I got a driveway here. Go ahead, I'll have fun. So I pulled out of the driveway and I took my basketball, dribbled a few times, and then I looked up at that backboard attached to the garage, and I took the basketball and I tossed it up against the backboard. But then I let it bounce its way off of the driveway into the grass, and I went inside and didn't pick up the basketball until Dad came back the next day. Why? You see, I discovered as a fifth grader, it's no fun throwing a ball if you don't have a goal. How did I do? I don't know how I did. I just threw the ball up and nothing happened. It just dribbled itself off the driveway into the grass. When you lack goals, you lack a sense of knowing. Even if you miss the goal, there's something about having something to aim at that just allows you to enjoy the game. So the next time you think of the word goal, just think of that backboard without the goal and the ball dribbling itself off into the grass. That's what happens to adults too.
So what Perry's talking about here with these comments around where we're going is this, what motivates you, the motive behind why you're leading people. And so will you help the leader you are working with make the shift? That's the question that I'm asking.
Yeah, for me, I thought about it in reading some of John's input on this about clarity in with yourself about what leadership is about. Why are you a leader? There definitely are perks that are going to come your way by having a title. You've got something that's going to be associated with that. But we did a podcast a while back called "The High Calling of Leadership," and I got really affected by some conversations I had with people about why they were in leadership, why they were leading, and I got the impression that it was about some status, ego type of thing. And I thought, no, that's not it. The high calling of leadership is really about others. It's about moving a team to a greater good. And I thought, how much in grasp of reality are you with your own reality about what leadership is about? Why are you doing this? And I want them to get clear about reality.
Yeah. Well, what's the statement that the difference between expectations and reality is disappointment, right? And I think as we begin to take our leadership journey and career, for me, I'm speaking directly for me, my expectations may have been a little bit different. We're not necessarily even around perks, but just maybe the involvement and what it would take, which kind of the reality, which leads me to the statement. The reality is everything worthwhile is uphill. It's going to be hard. Yeah. It's not an easy journey.
Do you recall being when you were an individual contributor, did you want to be a manager?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Now there's some that don't.
Yeah. But I recall specifically, I mean, I was with IBM as a sales guy. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, and I'm watching these sales managers. And they got all kind of privileges, it seems to me.
Yeah.
And I think I want to be one of them.
Yeah.
But why did I want to be one of them? Because I wanted to be in
what you saw.
Yeah, I want to have that privilege or whatever that was. It came with that. And that was the wrong motive from the get-go. So.
Yeah. I think leaders don't really understand. So the motive starts, right? Yeah. But then, man, the challenges and the difficulties that come along with that. And here's my point in making that. Though the perks, going back to the perks, versus the price. The perks, man, they're superficial. They don't last. They go away. But man, when it comes to the focus around the people, then that stuff stays with you forever, right? You get phone calls, you get emails, you get people that say, man, because you invested in me. And so just have that right motive, but understand it's going to be hard. And I think if you have the right focus, it'll help you through those difficult times. And it'll allow you to have that hope for the future. I also want to say this as we're talking about this. It is going to be hard. It is going to be uphill. And at times it is lonely. We don't talk a lot about this, because you want to be rallying the troops. You want to be with the team. But at times, leading certain things, certain projects, certain times, and doing it the right way is going to be lonely.
Yeah, I've heard John use those words you just used about hope and hard, that you want to keep hope, optimism alive and hope for the future and what we're doing, but you need to be in reality of it's hard. There are hard parts of being the leader. Another thing I want my leader to understand when I'm coaching in this area is that you are the example, that you should be paying the price. People should be seeing you paying the price of doing great leadership. And I think sometimes that perk-based leaders that is that a term? Can I say perk-based leaders?
It is
I just
now.
made that up.
It is now.
They have a tendency to command others to do things that they're really not doing or don't know how to do or wouldn't even think of doing. And I like a leader that leads from the front, that leads by example, that says, I'm willing to pay the price of being in there. That really, to me, is what paying the price is I'm in it with them. I'm not standing back getting the perks of their hard work. I'm in the hard work.
We're setting the foundation here, just so you know, like there is a price to pay for leadership. And it's not just, sitting back, to your point, looking at the sales manager saying, I want to be able to have a company car. I want to be able to go on flights. I want to go play in golf tournaments, like all those perks that end up happening. And so we just realistically, it is hard there is a price to it. And so the essence of this, John talks about it is kind of the know the way, show the way, go the way, right? So as a leader, you need to understand that. And here's 3 statements that John would say. He'd say, follow me leaders, believe in themselves before and more than others do. So you got to have that believe in yourself, invest in yourself. The second one is follow me leaders, set expectations for themselves before and more than others do. And then the third comment here is follow me leaders, make commitments to themselves before and more than others do. Right. And so it's the price that you're willing to pay, the price you're putting on yourself to be able to have influence and lead people.
Yeah, I love it. Even just, do you ever, the words follow me, are they part of your vernacular
No.
with the team? Oh, no, I wasn't asking you directly. Yeah.
Oh, I thought the team asked you to ask me that on the podcast.
Yeah, why are we not following?
Yeah.
All right, the third thing I really want these leaders that I coach, it's one of my favorite words in leadership, is consistency.
Yeah, man.
You can't just pay the price a little bit and then, okay, I've paid the price. Now I'm going to go back to my office and I'm going to go enjoy the perks of this. I really want, if I'm going to be, that price you talked about, putting others first, showing the way, being an example, doing the hard things, setting expectations, holding people accountable, really mixing it up with the team and leading by example from the front. I can't just do that sometimes. I need to be consistently being a part of that. I need to be consistently part of their world with my team and showing that I'm leading from the front. I'm with them in it, and it just sets me apart from somebody setting up for perks.
Yeah, you've heard that statement of where you have to give up to go up, and I think once you kind of figure this out and you're paying the price, I think you have to even give up even more if you want to kind of stay up, and if you desire to lead at higher levels, you need to keep paying the price. I love this right here that you put in my notes where it says consistency provides security for others. People know where you stand and they depend on you. The highest compliment you can receive as a leader is that. I think in today's age of leading people in organizations and the culture, 2 words that aren't talked about, 2 competencies that aren't talked about a lot is consistency and calmness. Now, not all of us are wired for calm, so I bent towards that because I have a little bit of a wiring towards that. But I think both of those things are extremely contagious and at times are tough to do, but it's the price of leading.
Well, let's do a little back and forth with you on that. I love you say, so consistency provides security. I would say consistency establishes your reputation, which, to your point about calm, is contagious.
Yeah.
And if things are going sideways and your team looks at you and you're not calm, that's a bad reputation to have. And so people are watching you. We talk about that all the time. People are watching you all the time.
Yeah.
If you deliver consistently, it really helps you develop influence with others through that.
Here's what I love about what you said about in regards to reputation. Leaders, understand this. Your reputation walks in the room before you do.
Ooh, yeah.
It shows up in a meeting. It shows up on the phone call before you ever get there. And so you need to make sure that you understand that. And because I think that being consistent keeps you in that leadership conversation, in that leadership game, and it keeps you from the whole swing back and forth, right? Like we've all worked for that leader before where we just didn't know what type of day it was. And you play in that emotional roller coaster of, do I ask this question? Do I not? Do I go into that meeting? What am I going to hear in that meeting? Again, remember back to my statement of your reputation precedes you. It walks in before you. And so I feel like as a leader, part of a price you need to pay is learning if it's not natural wiring for you, develop a learned behavior to be consistent.
And I'll also say that consistency compounds.
Oh, I love
it
that.
really, the reality is that none of these things we're talking about really feels amazing. It's practicing, studying, showing up, working hard, asking questions, changing, trying, failing, trying again. But it's all necessary for what we're doing. And so when I continue this consistency, it compounds over time as people on the team begin to see what the hard work of leadership is. They don't necessarily they know the reality of it is they're saying, I want to be a part of what you're doing because you're showing yourself for me and for the team. It's the price you pay every day to reach your potential is what you're going to be communicating to others.
Yeah.
So I love that consistency really sets forward where we're going for results.
Yeah, I love that. I think as I wrap up, one of the things when you said that's a tremendous statement. And most people understand and dig into the compounding of their money, right? We all were like, okay, what's the 7 year? What is this? And you go through that. But man, do you think about what is happening with your time and your investment and the price that you're paying and leading people and the fact that that's compounding? And then what's the result of that? And I think that's a powerful statement. As I close, here's one thing that I want to just mention. John wrote a book called The Leader's Greatest Return. Mm-hmm. And when we think about the return on investment, we think about our return, we often go back to the financial return. So if I invest in X with somebody, what's going to be the return on that? And I don't think it's a coincidence that we talk about perks to price today. And we talk about the leader's greatest return as I wrap up here, saying that there is a price that we will pay to develop, invest in, and add value to people. But here at Maxwell Leadership, we believe in adding value to leaders that will multiply value to others. We believe that everybody deserves to be led well. And in order to do that, you're going to pay a price. But I promise you this, just like back to the title of John's book, it will be the greatest return on your time and on your resources that you ever invest. And so I want to encourage you to make that shift from perks to price when it comes to leading people.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.
you.